final lesson of the day is filtering across a many-to-many, right? Um, so, we have our different drop downs then for condition for the different many sides that we're going to add and so on and so forth. The example we talked about here on the doctors we were just talking about is what if I want to just see doctors with a given specialty? Because if we went to patients, we might say, well, what if I just want to see patients that have had diabetes, right? Only those patients in their medical history. How could we go about that, right? Of course, we know we can actually come in here, say they've had diabetes, right? Check it off. And sure enough, okay, there it is, back to the patient list. I see it listed here, but I want to see all the patients with that in their medical history. That's going to be the kind of filtering we're going to introduce. And as I give you a hint right on the page in Blackboard where we introduce this topic, it's all about .any, .any as an operator in our LINQ query, right? Okay, so let me just stop running for a second. All right, so we're going to do both. We're going to do I got too many to many to work with so far in our example, so we're going to utilize this on both, this approach. In fact, we don't have any filtering on doctor yet, so when we get to doctor, we're going to be adding filtering from scratch. But here for the patient index, okay, we already have this filter section here that we're collapsing, right? So basically we have one row, okay, we have 3, select by doctor, filter by medical trial, and then search the patient name and then a button to submit or clear, right? So that's all in one row right now. So I'm going to break that up a little bit because we're going to get too many to fit across the screen in one. So I'm just going to replace this row inside the card itself, right? So I'm just breaking it up, right? So in the first row, I'll have my 2 selects for doctor and filter, right? And then I'm going to have filter by condition, okay? Search patient name. So the only one that's new, this is what we added, right? We're going to have a drop-down list where you can have a list of all the conditions that are in the medical history, and you can choose one, right, in order to actually then filter for it. Now, different topic altogether. Say, what if you want to choose more than one? But let's just keep it simple enough, a step at a time here, folks, and we'll just filter for one medical condition in their history. Now, before I go on, let me point out we had very easily in the view data the data to provide for these 2 drop-down lists, doctor ID and medical trial ID, right? We had that in our view data because we called in the patient's controller. I'm going to need that, so I might as well come up here and get it open. In the patient's controller, in the index action here, right, we called this populate drop-down lists, right? So that was already in place. So that's great. It gave us, and if I go down to it, I can right click, go to definition, right? Down in the bottom here, we see it calls the select list for doctor and medical trial, right? And puts it all in view data. So you might think, well, now in this case, coming way back up here to the index, right? I'm going to need a data for a drop-down list, a select list for all the medical conditions, right? I could add it theoretically to my populate drop-down lists, okay? The way I've done for the other 2, for doctors and medical trials, medical trials. But, I call this in multiple places throughout the controller because we need those other 2. This is the only action where I'm going to need a select list of the actual medical conditions, right? So there's no point putting it here, right? Inside the populate drop-down list. It's a one-off. It's just going to be needed in the index. So I could just add it here. Maybe I'll put it right above or below, doesn't matter, populate drop-down lists, right? So it's the same kind of code we've written before, context.conditions, order by, always good to put anything in a list into alphabetical order by the condition name, okay? And the select list has the value of ID and the display text is the condition name, right? So that just gets that third set of data, that third select list available now to the filter at the top of the screen. Speaking of that, though, we need to actually be able to access the parameters that's passed in too, right, from that drop-down list. So we could add a new parameter anywhere in here, okay? Maybe I'll do it right after, well, I could do it right in front of this one. Just make sure I have commas in the right place. Okay, see, I've got one too many commas here. Okay, that fixed up my little boo-boo in copying and pasting it, right? So after these other ones, I have a nullable int for the condition ID, and that will come from the drop-down list where they choose a condition ID to filter by, right? Okay, so we have that parameter. We have the data being added to view data to populate the drop-down list. Now we're ready to actually do the filtering. This is pretty straightforward because really all we have to do is add yet another if. Okay, we already have in these filters as many as needed, right? The one for the foreign key, doctor ID, medical trial ID, searching the name, et cetera, et cetera. So all we really need is one for our condition ID. If the condition ID has value, right? In other words, if they've chosen one, it's not that top option at the top of the list, then we'll come to our iQueryable, our patients, and add this where condition. The difference is it's your first time seeing use of .any, right? Now, again, this works because we've included patient conditions, right? As we actually worked with the doctor, with the patient here, right? We got the patients. We make sure we included the patient conditions and even the condition as well for display on the page. So we can go to the patient conditions collection inside the patient and use .any to see are there any patient conditions where this is true, right? Where the condition ID, that foreign key inside the patient condition, matches the parameter that was passed in, that condition ID that we passed in up top, right? And if there is, then it satisfies that logical requirement and that patient will be included in the output. And believe it or not, that's as simple as that. That's all that actually takes, right? So we can do a quick test, make sure we can now filter across the many-to-many for medical history for a patient. So coming to patients, right? So Anthony here has diabetes. I'm going to just pick on somebody else, give them a few different in their medical history, right? Okay, so it doesn't even, we don't see the diabetes unless we expand it. But if I come to my filter search, now you see we have more and more choices here, and one of them is by condition. So if I say diabetes, okay, I've got 3 showing up. Okay, Anthony, here, Antoinette Anthony that I did earlier. This is the one that we just modified. It's included in the list, even though it's not at the top showing us, right? And then Wilma, she also in her history had diabetes. So you can see how it works. Now we have all the patients that have that in their medical history. All right, now to get the same thing on doctors, we're going to have to do a little bit more work because currently we don't have any filtering, not even any sorting. Maybe before I go on, I'll talk about that. Is there a need to sort here? Well, really, all there is name, right? So yeah, I guess you could add it if you wanted to reverse the sort order or whatever, but I'm just going to assign one sort order, and unless the client complains, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm just automatically sort it by their full name or something like that, and away they go, right? But it's mainly the filtering we're going to add here. So I'll just close these two. We're done with them. Okay, so let's come to the doctor's controller, and we'll need the doctor's index view because that's where we do filtering, right? Okay. So we're going to add, now this has to be inside the form, of course, right? Because we're using our buttons that get submitted with the form, but above the table, I'll add basically a similar div to what we're using on the patient, right? It's using the same approach. We'll have a button that we can click to expand and contract this collapsible div using Bootstrap Collapse, right? I'm going to use my same number of filters approach and so on and so forth, okay? And inside here, there's only a couple, so I'm just going to have a single row, search the doctor name, and then filter by specialty. So we'll need specialty ID. Again, we'll need a populated drop-down list for that, right? And away we go. And then down further, that code doesn't change from what we had. This just adds that filter at the top. And remember, we already had the paging and everything in place. So that's an advantage for us. We don't have to make as many changes to keep that working. Okay, so I'll just save this, right? Coming back to the controller, okay, well, we know we need 2 more parameters, right? Because we had 2 things, additional things to filter by. So coming to the actual index, right now we have page information for paging. So I'm going to add my 2 filters, my search string and my specialty ID, okay? Once more, I could grab the code from the other controller, but we need to supply the select list, okay, for our drop-down list of specialties, okay? And also we want to manage that business of counting the number of filters, right? So I can put that same code in place here, okay? Number of filters initially is 0, okay? I'm just setting the view data filtering, okay, so that the button can go a dark color or a light color depending on whether there is something to do with it or not. Okay, now the filter and sort section. So, right, make sure that this has an iQueryable, and it does, right? So we're good for that. So I can add as many filters as needed. Sorry, my mouse ran away on me and I selected way too much, okay? So I'm gonna put that in here above where we handle filtering or paging. And it follows the same approach we've done in the past. So we do our LINQ query, getting the basic query defined. Then if specialty ID has value, okay, we're going to use our .any approach. We can go into the doctor specialties, which we made sure we included, okay, check for one that matches the specialty was passed in, and that of course increments our number of filters. We're still going to do our search string approach here, checking the first and last name, just as we did with patients as well, but of course in this case it's doctors, right? This code is identical to the other one where we just, depending on the number of filters, okay, we're changing how it's going to be displayed on the screen by adding these values to the view data, okay? And then for sorting, I'm just going to always sort by the doctor name, by last name and then first name, right? If the client doesn't like it, well, change it then, right? That's not a problem. Okay, and then handling paging, right? That's fine, we can do that. And that doesn't have to change at all, right? And that's it. That should give us the ability to add our sort and filter. Coming to doctors. Okay, so now I can check for a given specialty, anesthesiology, and I only see the doctors here. There's only one page, just these 5 doctors. Now, none of them actually, I see it listed as the very top one, but they all have anesthesiology in here, right? So it's a skill, okay, or a specialty that they are accredited to have, each and every one of these doctors, right? Of course, we can also come in here and I can further narrow it down. ER, right? There's only one doctor that has ER in their name. Notice the 2 filters applied, and also has that specialty. I can always bring this up to see what the filter applied is. Okay, so that works. Success. All right. I can always clear the filter, and away we go. Any questions about that? So now you can filter across a many-to-many just as easily, essentially, as you can with a one-to-many.